Hello, everyone, and welcome to our lunchtime webinar, Simply Smart Seminar. We have a very special guest today on our webinar. We have Saba Arif from Smart Dental Compliance. And we also, hi Saba. We also have Zameer Nazarali from Simplify ER. So, hi Zameer.
Hi Fawzia, hi everyone.
Hello. So we're going to start off, we're going to kickstart with Zameer, and he's going to take you straight through to the HR side of things, of staying compliant and staying on top of managing your team. So I'm going to hand you over to Zameer now, and he's going to kickstart our webinar.
Fantastic. Thank you, Fawzia. I'm just going to share my screen. Could you just give me the permissions to share screen?
Yeah, sure.
Thank you.
There we go, Zameer. That's
amazing. Thank you very much. Cool. Excellent. Can everyone see the screen?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for attending today. So I've got a couple of areas that we'll be talking through in the hour, and I'm going to start off with the nuts and bolts of employment contracts. But just a quick intro as to who I am. So I'm Zameer Nazarali. I'm the founder of Simplify ER. We're an HR employment law consultancy, and we work with businesses to help simplify HR for them and to help them manage their employment processes better. Oops. There we go. And a little bit more about myself. I'm a qualified UK solicitor and chartered legal executive with a specialism in employment law. And I've had about 15 years of experience within the HR sector as well. So one of the most common issues with any client we start advising is their employment contracts. So there can be a raft of reasons why. And usually when we do start, our clients look something like this. Because let's be honest, contracts can drive you absolutely insane. You know, they're either too long or too short or don't make any sense. And what we always advocate is it's okay to be stressed out about your contracts, but the important thing is to find a way forward and to find where to start. And so on that note, I wanted to share a few tips with you. You may sort of be new to your dental practice, or you may have been part of a practice that's moved to new ownership. And commonly what happens is the contracts will just get left for quite a few years, and things change as you go forward. So there's a number of areas that we need to keep an eye on. And when we're starting a review, the temptation is to dive in and just get a new contract out and hope for the best. But often that can really skirt over the issues, and also you can lose that ability to future-proof, which is really, really important. So where do you start? So I'd always start by understanding what contracts you have in place. Really important to understand if everything in your current contract template is relevant and applicable, or if things have moved on. And then from there, you start with your foundation. So within employment law, the foundation, there's approximately 27 points which need to be put into a contract, which then form the compliance part of employment law. So those are your fundamental terms, your name, your position, salary, holiday, and things like, grievance and disciplinary processes. But what we always advise clients is to understand the difference between informing and giving too much information, which is why contracts end up being so long. So for example, where you start talking about a disciplinary process, it's okay to have a paragraph in there announcing that the process is in place and this is the person to go to, and then refer them to the handbook. So doing your handbook and your contract in parallel is really, really important, because you can go into the meat of things in the handbook, but you can acknowledge it within the contract. Second thing, so now we've got our sort of foundations, right? The second thing is getting clear on what you need for your specific practice. So you're going to have very nuanced policies and procedures. And you want to make sure that you capture those and not just take a templated approach, because obviously once the contract's signed, that's going to be your defense barrier. That's going to be the thing that keeps you on the right side of compliance. And also it makes sure that you and your employee know what to expect of each other, which is really, really vital. So you want to make sure that any specifics you need in your contracts are captured within this planning process. Now, some of the areas that are really developed and common issues that we have from a lot of dental practices are around holidays, because typically not every employee will have set number of days, set number of hours. There'll be different hours on different days. And with the recent case law that's come through in the last few months, there are now different ways of calculating your holiday. So having that holiday clause is really important to firstly reiterate to your employees that if you are not a regular hours staff, you will be calculating holidays on the 5.6 weeks. That's your entitlement, but it's based on your average working week. So it clears up any confusion. That's typically where employees get quite frustrated, because obviously they can't quite understand how to calculate that. Now, of course, you can use a fantastic platform like Smart Dental, which will take away all the pain. And then you tie that up with having a clear holiday clause in your contract. The other thing to keep in mind for holidays is, what are reasonable notice periods? Have you taken into account covering staff and rotas? Do you have Christmas shutdowns? And, let staff know up front that there's going to be certain periods of time that you'll need to close down. One example that was unforeseen for one of our clients recently was they had a full practice refurb and they needed to close down for a couple of days. Now, luckily, we drafted in a clause for them to say, in sort of unexpected situations, giving the right notice, we can ask employees to go on holiday for short periods of time, which really helped them a lot. So, you have to try and assess as much as you can to give you that flexibility going forward. Then we move on to protection. So of course, you've got things like data protection, especially if you've got like high-end practices with, well-known or celebrity type patients, or just people who need that confidentiality and vulnerability as well. There's the confidentiality aspect about the business. So you might have certain things you want to keep closed within your circle. So you need to protect yourself from that angle. And for employees who are quite involved in the business development, especially, you want to have the correct post-termination restrictions. So what that means is you can restrict employees from doing certain things like going to local competitors, taking your patient lists, taking your business ideas, poaching key staff for a period of time. You have to draft them very, very carefully. Because courts will only accept them if they're considered reasonable. So getting someone like myself to assess your needs and translate that into a covenant that works, a restriction covenant that works, is essential if you want it to be more than a fear factor. So look, I've given you a lot of info on contracts and what to put into them, but once we've gone through that process of getting the right mechanisms in there, it's essential then to make sure you follow up on several levels. One is, we've had clients in the past where we've done fantastic contracts, fantastic templates, and nobody signs them. And then 6 months down the line, we have an issue and nobody signed the contract. Now, some of that contract, it gets accepted by an implied term because the employee is working under those conditions. But some of the other parts, like the protection side of things, they don't. Or if you want to have a deductions clause where, say, an employee has damaged some equipment or taken too much holiday and you want to take money back, if you don't have a signed contract with a deductions clause in it, it's not valid. So really important you follow up on one level of making it get signed. But secondly, really important you follow up in terms of consistency and application. Now, later on in this hour, we're going to talk about disciplinaries and grievances, which falls very much into this. But what I mean to say is where you're setting out rules and processes, you need to make sure that you follow them consistently in line with your contracts. So make sure you can police them properly, you can manage them properly. An easy example that jumps to mind is mobile phones. So, I've had hilarious situations where clients have come to us with templates previously saying all mobiles must be locked in the lockers, and yet they don't have any lockers. So completely useless clause. So, making sure that you have something that's relevant to you is ideal, especially when something goes wrong. In terms of the style of your contracts, we always advocate plain English. I know there's a temptation from lawyers like me to go waffling on with no full stops and lots of commas. I'm a big advocate of plain English contracts because you want your employees to understand what you're chatting on about, and that helps get that buy-in. And throughout your contract, feel free to tell the person drafting, or if you are drafting yourself, to reflect your values. So if you want to have a mission statement at the beginning saying, look, we value our team and we really want everyone engaged, say that message. There's no harm at all. It doesn't at all challenge the validity, but it might mean that your employees are a lot more engaged when they're reading the document. And like I've reiterated before, everything in your contract, highly recommend, make sure it's manageable, that you can enforce it, and that it's consistent with what you're actually going to do.
Zameer, I'm so sorry to interrupt you. Can I
No
just
problem.
ask, I was at a practice last week, and I was preparing them for their upcoming CQC inspection, and they were just telling me, so I just spoke to them about how did they end up buying the practice and what were the main challenges of when they were buying the practice. And one of the principals said, Saba, one of the most difficult thing that we faced was when we bought the practice, a lot of the staff members were very old. They had been working there for like 12 years, 15 years. So all their contract got TPU'd. And it was very difficult because they had like these culture and traditions where they were allowed to take 2 hours for lunch. There was, again, they were allowed to do that. On a Friday, they were allowed to go home at 1 o'clock and go and do all their grocery shopping and then come back after 3 hours just for another hour, and then that's it, go home. And then one of the girls had this special arrangement where every Tuesday and Thursday she could leave for about 3 hours to go and get her kids, look after them, and wait till her husband came, and then they could take it in turns and things like that. And he said, Saba, that was just so difficult. Like, we just didn't know what to deal with it, like, because the contracts were getting TPU'd because we bought the practice. And I know when you are working for corporates as well, a lot of the contracts get TPU'd as well. So I don't know, he didn't specify if those clauses were in the contract that they were allowed to do this, but let's say that, there are some clause in the contracts before the practice gets taken over that they're allowed to have, let's say, 3 hours lunch break or 2 hours lunch break or a shorter working day, and they've got all these funny arrangements and that's present in the contract. What could the new owners who are taking over the practice do? Can they actually change their contract? Can they say, right, those contracts are voided now, we're not going to use those contracts, you're going to get a new contract?
Great question, Saba, and I think this is very common in the dental world because a number of practices are usually bought out and go on from sort of owner to owner. So, okay, CHUPI is a minefield in terms of employment law. If I can give you a sort of very brief high-level guidance, but obviously anyone listening, I'd strongly urge you get specialist advice because CHUPI is a very technical area. Shameless plug, it's one of my specialities. What do you do when you get undesirable contractual clauses moving across? Now, under CHUPI, it's absolutely obligatory to take those contract terms on. So you have to transfer them across. You don't have a choice on that matter, unless the exception is if you're buying a practice that is within a limited company framework and you're buying the shares of that business. Where CHUPI applies is where there's a change of entity. So if it goes from Zameer Limited to Nazarali Limited, then that's a CHUPI transfer. But if you're just buying Zameer Nazarali Limited and the shares and that company is not changing, CHUPI doesn't apply in that case. So that's something to explore. There are a lot of commercial law considerations there in terms of, the history, the finance, the relationship with the HMRC of that limited company that you'd have to take on as well. So that's something to consider. But let's say you're taking on a self-employed practice where it's in someone's name, which is quite typical. So you will have to take the contracts on. However, under the CHUPI regime, you have certain exceptions where you can start to consult to change contractual clauses. Now, the general default rule is that you can't change a contractual clause just for the sake of changing it. But if it falls under what are known as economic, technical, or organizational reasons, and you can make a strong business case to say the business as a whole is suffering and therefore we need to equalize, or we need to develop a new way of working, then you can consult, usually typically a minimum of 4 weeks, and you can start going through that process. The later you make the changes after the purchase of the practice, the better, because the more further away it is from the transfer, the better. But sometimes that's not practical. So what you need to do is, if you know of these changes up front, you inform the seller, who then informs their employees that these are the likely changes. You have to have a very strong business and legal case, and then you follow the consultation process. Typically, it can be quite a torrid process because there's going to be a culture that's embedded there. People don't want to change. People are enjoying their favorable terms. So obviously, it's got to be done with a lot of patience and sensitivity, but it is possible, but there are risks attached to it as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem, no problem. So yeah, actually that sort of takes us nicely onto my second section, which is, once you've now got your templates, how do you embed that into your practice? Because obviously you have contracts in place, or you don't, but you still need to consult, because there's likely to be changes to the consultation, to the clauses as you've created this new contract. You're going to say, 5 years ago this worked, but now we need to do this. So we need to go through a consultation process. So the way to map this out is have a clear picture on what the end goal is. What is it you want to achieve, and when do you realistically want to achieve it by? You then create manageable and achievable tasks. So for example, you plan out a transparent consultation meeting to launch the process. And then you will work through. So what we normally do is we split the practice into different departments, and we approach each department separately, give a lead for that person or for that team, and then we work through any feedback that comes back in. Constant checking in is really important. What you don't want to do is leave a contract with someone for 2 weeks and you haven't heard from them, and all their anxieties are festering, and you haven't sort of addressed them. So keeping in touch and letting employees know where they can channel their questions, really, really important. Also remember the human side of this process. So roll out contracts with compassion and transparency. So let the employees know this is why we're making the change, not just I'm the new owner or I'm the new practice manager and I want things to change, because often there is a logic behind what you're doing. So share that with them. Let them sort of feed into that, because then you're more likely to get buy-in, because if they understand where you're coming from, they may agree even if they don't like it, and then they may come along with you on the journey. And I keep saying this, but keeping consistent is absolutely key. So if you're going to treat one employee in a certain way, make sure it's the same with every employee. It's very hard not to sometimes, but don't have favoritism without objectivity, if that makes sense. As I said, then once you have this in place, you then need to, and sorry, we're just sort of repeating some of it, but I just wanted to circle round onto the employee handbook side of things. So once you have your contracts in place, as I said, you can flesh out the rest of it in your employee handbook. So it's assessing what you have in your contracts versus what are normally in your practice policies. A number of clients that we've come across, they don't have specific employee handbooks, but they have it within their practice policies as part of their CQC policies as well. So you're looking at what needs to be fleshed out, where do you need to give more detail. So there'll be things like I said, the disciplinary, the grievance, the GDPR expectations, there might be codes of conduct, that can all go into your handbook. The handbook traditionally is a very large document. It's more useful for sleeping on than reading, because it's usually about 60 pages plus. What we try and do is make it a little bit more engaging. So keep it very simple, very succinct. So I've seen sort of maternity policies that can go on for 20 pages. Keep it really, really, 1 or 2 pages. We try and, where we can, put diagrams in just to show the circle of, you found out you're pregnant. This is the form you need to put in. This is the notice you give. This is the time you take off. These are your entitlements. So maternity is a really good example of that. Holidays can be the same. So if you want to display, you need to give your notice period at this time. This is what's going to happen. You'll get sign off you go. So keeping it really simple. and make sure that you regularly review it. And when I say review, it's not just a check to see if everything's still intact, but it's making sure it's meaningful, that contracts are still up to date, that handbooks are still up to date, policies are being adhered to as well. So check in with your managers, with any other staff who would be responsible for that. And then in that way, you've got an effective policy from day one. So you're not sort of going back on yourself. And finally, if you do still need to make changes after a while, because things do develop as you go forward, remember, your employees are humans, and it's human relations, as I call it. I know HR means human resources, but we like to think of it as creating relationships with the human beings in your team. As practice managers, take the lead. Don't be afraid. I know there's a lot of myths about employment law can bite you in the backside, and there are situations where that can happen. But communicate with confidence and communicate with transparency. Really, really important. And be happy to be challenged. If an employee asks you a question or questions why you're changing a policy, that's a good thing because it makes you think. So when you get that challenge, be clear on what is your objective, what is your why, what is your purpose of doing this, and hear that feedback out. There's no harm. Obviously, it comes to a point where you say, look, I've heard you, I understand what you're saying, but actually this is what we need to achieve. But constantly reflect, because that will create a good engagement process. So we talk about employee engagement a lot. People always ask, where do we start with engagement? It starts in your everyday interactions. It doesn't need a training course to kick things off. It actually just needs a good mindset. So with these things, I think you'll be able to have a good starting point in terms of how to put your new contracts in place. And of course, if there's anything we can help with, we're always available. So that brings me to an end on our first section. Thank you very much, Saba.
Thank you so much, Zameer. That was very, very helpful. I think definitely, absolutely right. We undermine the importance of contracts. I mean, even me, myself, I hate contracts. I hate reading them. I hate creating them, everything about them. So it's a good reminder that actually they are really important, and it's really important to have all those clauses inside as well, just to make sure that you've covered your back. Especially for the staff member. Another thing I would like to say is from a CQC point of view as well, it is really important to have contracts in place. CQC do look for all your recruitment documents. In fact, as soon as you get an email from the CQC, one of the first things that they will get you to fill out is your recruitment tracker and your training tracker. So basically that just says, please, can you fill all these things out, that you've got a contract in place, you've got references in place, you've got CVs in place. So it is really, really good, and it is very important. The second thing I would say, we get so many of our clients calling saying that, we're having this issue with the staff member, we're having that issue. And I always ask them, have you got a contract in place? Oh yeah, we've definitely got a contract, but I don't think she signed it. So you're absolutely spot on that sometimes we might even have contracts in place. We might even have got it done. We might be with a compliance company Smart Dental or somebody else, and then they've got everything, but we haven't got the staff members to sign it. So again, very, very important. And I would always say, at least once a year, just sit down with your staff member and go through their contract with them. Or even at the beginning, when you are recruiting the staff member, I know we just tend to email, oh, dear, blah, 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 please find your attached contract. What I try to do with my staff is I will sit down as part of the induction and be like, here's your contract. I did send it to you. I hope you managed to read it. Is there any questions that you would like to ask about your contract? And a lot of the time I get the girl saying, oh, I'm not sure about this section where it says about my holiday entitlement. Can you just go through that with me? So it's things like that which are, extremely important. And I think we do, being managers, we're so busy with so many things. And at the current climate, the staff turnover is so high that it becomes a bit of a tedious task to actually sit down and look at contracts, create contracts, and go through contracts. So I can totally understand. But again, if we want our backs covered and if we want to make sure everything is running smoothly, I think it is very important, and we need to do that. So thank you very much, Zameer, for outlining all of that. I'm going to quickly share my screen now. I've managed to create a very quick little PowerPoint for everyone. So hi everyone, my name is Saba. I'm from Smart Dental Compliance and Training. I'm one of the senior consultants at Smart Dental, who some of you might have met or some of you might know. I do carry out a lot of CQC inspections as well. So yeah, sorry, somebody just popped a question in the chat box. So Zameer, it's a question that says, is contract that hasn't been signed binding?
Yeah, so sorry to cutting Saba, but yeah, contracts that haven't been signed can be binding. So if an employee has been working knowing the conditions that are in place, so say you've emailed it, they haven't signed it, but they know that the contract's there. Yeah. Largely, all the terms are binding. As I said, there's certain terms like deductions clauses and restrictive covenants which wouldn't be, because they need sort of categoric signing off, because it's taking away the right of the employee. So I hope that helps.
Thank you so much. Hope that answered your question. Guys, if you do have any questions, please feel free to put it in the meeting chat, and then Zameer will answer it or myself will answer it. So any questions or anything like that, this webinar is recorded, so it will go live hopefully by Monday on our YouTube channel. So if you have missed it or if you would like to go through it again, you can always have access to it. I will share the link out and we'll send it out to everyone as well. So I'll be talking a bit about CQC compliance because I just love it. It's my forte. So a lot of people asked us questions like, how do you feel confident passing the CQC inspections? So I know like everybody's worst nightmare is CQC inspection. On a daily basis, we get hundreds of calls where clients are calling us saying, I've got a CQC inspection, Saba, what do we do? Sometimes they are using a compliance system and sometimes they're not. So I think obviously having a compliance system in place does definitely 100% make things a lot more easier. Just because you've got all your policies, procedures, you've got your audits, your risk assessment, things are in place. That's why it gives you that bit of peace of mind. But in terms of like feeling confident, number one, I would definitely say go through the CQC fundamental standards. This is one of the things that people do tend to miss out a lot. We all start panicking and we start thinking about audits, we start thinking about risk assessments and policies and procedures, but make sure you are aware of the CQC fundamental standards. Like, for example, in the last couple of days, I've been in a lot of registered manager interviews. So there's been a lot of like new squat practices opening, and the CQC have asked about the CQC fundamental standards. And being a registered manager, you think, okay, I know it's safe, well led, effective, all of that kind of stuff, but they didn't really know what the actual fundamental standards were. So making sure that you have a good understanding of the regulation, the guidelines around the fundamental standard and the framework is very important, because if you know the basics, obviously, then it will be a lot more easier. Second tip is conducting internal audits. Now, again, there's loads of audits, there's loads of risk assessment, there's loads of compliance paperwork that you can do depending on what compliance provider you are using. Some of them give you a lot of audits. I've come across people who said, Saba, there's like 40 audits in here. What I always say is with the CQC, there are some things that are mandatory, okay? And then there are some things that are recommended. Please, please, please focus on the mandatory things. Look at what the mandatory things are. Now, obviously, with the IAM system, we actually tell you what your mandatory audits are. So you would know like which audit you need to do, how often you need to do it. And the audits are all there on our platform on a digital version that you can very easily do and update, and you get automated reminders. Now, again, if you're not using IAM and if you're using some other system or you don't use a system, one of the best ways you can find out what is mandatory or what is recommended is through the CQC Mythbusters. So if you look at the CQC Mythbusters, they actually tell you what is mandatory and what is recommended. So have a look at your, audits and carry out a gap analysis. So sometimes we just do audits for the sake of doing audits and we end up ticking boxes. But what CQC want to see is, when you are doing those audits, are you writing some action plans down? Is there something, missing and you've managed to find that and you've written it as part of your action plan? So let me give you a quick example, okay? So if we have a look at the cross-infection audit, one of the questions is, do you have a washer disinfector? So a lot of the people do not have a washer disinfector, but you can write in the action plan, looking into getting a washer disinfector in the future, because again, it is a good source of cleaning method, basically. Okay, so these are some of the things that you can put on your action points as well. Point number 3 is involve your staff. I think one of the things that managers take on too much is compliance. When it comes to other things, we're okay, we delegate few things here and there to our staff members, but when it comes to compliance, we're like, no, I'll do all the audits, I'll do all the risk assessments, don't worry about it. The staff don't even know they've got an inspection. Well, they know that they've got an inspection, but they don't really know what they need to do to prepare for an inspection. So please utilize your team, your in-house team, engage the whole team, have a quick 10 minutes morning huddle with them to say, guys, we've got CQC inspection in 2 weeks' time, and I really need help with this from everyone. I want everyone's recruitment documents and training documents by this deadline, and you need to make sure, like, for example, again, I'm giving you example of the IAM system because I find it really easy. I want you guys to log on to the compliance system and upload all your recruitment files on there, or upload all your training documents in there and do your CPD courses. So make sure you have clear expectations of what you expect from each staff member during the inspection. Okay, again, if you've got lead nurse, she must know how to carry a cross-infection process, because again, when the CQC comes in, they will ask them, can you show me how you decontaminate or sterilize your instruments? So she should be confident enough to walk you through that as well. All right, have policies and procedures which are customized to your practice. Again, sometimes people have like hundreds and hundreds of policies, but it's not customized to your practice. So for example, like, let's say the management of medicine policy. Does your practice dispense antibiotics? If they do, how is that tracked? How is that kept on top? How do you know that, excessive antibiotics are not being dispensed within the practice? So all these things need to be within the practice protocols in your practice policies. Okay. Focus on quality improvement and communicate with confidence. So focusing on, quality improvement is having a culture of continuous quality improvement. So, looking at getting feedback from your patients, getting feedback from your staff, getting feedback from the associate dentist, like, what do you guys think that we can improve on when it comes to quality and compliance? They might have some very, very good ideas, you never know. And then preparing for the inspection is making sure that you conduct a mock inspection. So again, this is something that we do. So if you have got an upcoming CQC inspection, you can always give us a call and we can come in and carry out a mock inspection, do a gap analysis as well. Sometimes it's better to be over prepared than under prepared. So I always tell my clients, please, where it comes to, yes, you think, oh, it's another cost, a mock inspection and all this kind of stuff, but you rather have that peace of mind that you've had a mock inspection and you know what is missing and you're able to implement that. Because once you get that inspection, there's no going back. You can't say to the inspector, oh yeah, sorry, I didn't have this and all this kind of stuff. So make sure that you are over preparing yourself for the CQC inspection. That's very, very important. Okay. So that's how you can feel confident in passing a CQC inspection. How to manage compliance was another question that one of our lovely managers asked. So develop a compliance training and awareness meeting. So make sure people are aware of compliance, because it is a very boring topic. I totally agree with people, and it is something that you put at the back seat because you've got so many other things to do, especially now. A manager is no longer a manager. It's a marketing manager, it's a HR manager, it's a compliance manager, it's a day-to-day running manager, it's a dental nurse, it's a dental receptionist. It's a cover-up for somebody who's called in sick. So you're wearing so many hats, and the last thing you want to think about is compliance. But make sure you book, like, we do something called lunch and learns. So we go into dental practices just for like 45 minutes. We make you aware of what is compliance, how you can manage compliance within the dental practice. So again, utilize it, book it, so all your staff members have some sort of up-to-date knowledge of compliance requirements. Okay, stay informed and engaged with regulatory authorities. So make sure you stay up to date of what's happening, any MHRA alerts. Because of COVID, there was lots of changes. Now things have started to settle down now, like the upcoming DSP toolkit that needs to be submitted today. I think, yeah, it's definitely today was the deadline. So I hope everybody's managed to do that and complete it. Regular review and update your compliance. So make sure you look at your audits, you look at your risk assessments, all your paperwork and it's all up to date. And last but not least, one of my favorite topics, or a question I would say, is how to recruit, build and manage the right team. Now, Zameer gave a lovely introduction, like communication. He touched up on the contracts as well and the importance of having that in place. But again, I'm just going to say some of the things from my experience, like define your team's needs. Start by defining the roles and skills required for your team. A lot of the time we're short of staff, and we go, you know what, we're short of staff. One of the nurses have left, we need to recruit another nurse. But you never know, you might have a receptionist who's working part-time, let's say 1 or 2 days a week, and she might be interested in progressing her career into dental nursing. So first, sit down and actually make a plan. So I need X, Y, and Z, okay, and how am I going to go about it? And what skills should that person have? Nowadays, like, everybody is into social media, and a lot with my team, I always ask my girls, or some of my staff members, are you interested in doing a bit of marketing or social media? Are you interested in going on a course? So some of them, they say, yeah, we would love to. And they're very natural. They're good photographers. They're good with their cameras. They're good with their Instagram. So I think, identifying the specific task or responsibilities or expertise needed to achieve your organization goals is very important. And checking, if somebody has a skill set, then why not utilize them? Why not give them an opportunity? Develop a comprehensive recruitment strategy. So basically, create a strategy of how you're going to attract and select candidates. So I get called so many times, Saba, I can't find a dental nurse, I can't find an associate dentist, I've put an ad up on Indeed, I have done this, I've done that. First of all, again, it's like, with our patients, you start in-house, you ask our patient, if you know any family and friend, you can recommend them to a practice. Ask your staff members if they know any family and friend who would be interested in working within the dental practice. Yes, sometimes it can be a sticky situation. It depends, again, on your policies. Some organizations say no friends and family working within the same practice and things like that. So it all depends on your policies. But again, ask in-house if people know of somebody. Consider like various channels such as job boards as well, professional networking, so dentistry shows, things like that. You'll meet a lot of similar-minded people over there. Maybe if you're going to a conference, or if you're at a webinar, or all these other things, I think you can utilize. And social media, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but I've got loads of contacts on my WhatsApp. All my clients are there, all my friends are there, my family's there. So sometimes I broadcast a message, is anybody looking for a dental nursing job or a dental reception job? So utilize that. And another one I would say is Facebook. There's loads of groups on Facebook for job boards and things like that. So utilize them as well. Conduct a thorough selection process. So when you are selecting candidates, I know it's very difficult to get good people now. And to get people through the door to apply is become very, very difficult. But please, just because you're short of staff and you really need somebody to come in, just don't go and just select the first candidate that's come in. Try to make the interview process a bit more challenging. I think sometimes like the interview process are very boring, and they're very straightforward, right? So what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? When can you start? What's your salary expectation? I think these are the 5 main questions that we ask, and we're all guilty of. I am as well. Like sometimes there's so many candidates, I'm like, okay, so my 5 questions are this. But what I've learned is you don't really, because people have Googled their answers, or they've used ChatGPT or whatever you want to call it nowadays. There's all sorts that you can utilize in terms of your resources. You can't really see the true personality of that person. So I like to do my interview in 2 stages. So first, I like to do it over the phone. I like to have like an informal chat with the staff members just to see, what their goals are, what do they want to achieve, and all this kind of stuff. And then I like to call them in face to face. When I call them in face to face, I say to them, spend an hour with my team, like, in our office, and see if you like the environment. And then I watch the way they are interacting with the staff members, if they are talking to them, if they're taking initiative to learn something. So try to create little things and things that you can really, and to be honest, you can never know a person unless they start working, and they're in that environment, and as the time goes. But I'm 100% sure there are things that you could do in order to be very selective with the staff members that you are recruiting, because come on, let's be honest, recruitment process is very stressful, especially when you're hiring, sending all the information to the accountant, getting them on the payroll, and then after 1 week they've left, and then you start all over again. It takes a lot of time, effort, energy, and it can be really stressful. So make sure you have a proper, robust selection process when you are recruiting your candidate. Emphasize culture fit. Look for candidates who share your organization value, your work ethics, your vision. So this is a bit of a tricky one, because it's hard to tell somebody about your values, your work ethics, and your vision in the first meeting, or even in the second meeting. But make sure that you know yourself. Sometimes we don't even know what our vision is. We don't even know what our value is, what our work ethics is. So if we don't know, how we're going to show that to another person? So obviously, constant reminders. When I have team meetings with my staff members, I remind them, guys, this is a fun place to work, okay? And there's boundaries, but we want to make everything fun. We want to make it easy. Our clients are number one. We need to make sure that we look after them really, really well. So if you know your work ethics and you're instilling that in your team constantly, then when you are recruiting candidates, or when candidates are coming in and they're doing trial days and things like that, they will see that is in you. They will see that, and then they will, hopefully, they would understand that as well. And then you can see if they are able to copy the same things. Like a lot of my staff members, they know what I'm all about, how I like things now, and they will make sure they go out of the way to look after clients, because this is what we want to do. We want to make sure that we make our client life super easy when it comes to passing inspections. So they know that we go out the way, and they would do that as well. Even if I'm in the office or I'm not, they would make sure that they go out the way to really look after our clients. Provide adequate onboarding and training. Again, one of the most difficult process is the onboarding process. So, going through all the paperwork, giving them the training. But what I always recommend, I say, look, do it in bite size. You don't have to just block your whole diary off one day, sit down with them, go through the whole checklist and go, here you go, I see you later. So I like to do it in the bite size. The first day, I just like to have an informal chat with them, get them to meet the team, just sit around, communicate with each other, have a look around, what's going on. And then, next day, go through some aspects, through some aspects. So make sure you're breaking it all down. Communicate clearly. Sometimes it's very hard. We're all from a different background, different cultures, different working environment. So sometimes it's really hard to understand someone. So try to communicate clearly to them and ask them, is it okay? Do you understand? Do you want me to go through anything else? Or sometimes what I do is, if I'm not around, I would ask one of my staff members, can you train her on this aspect? Because you're really good with Excel sheets, or you're really good in that area. So if you can train that person, that would be great. Because again, that might not be my expertise. Encourage collaboration and teamwork. Teamwork is very important, and especially having team events. I don't know if all practices do it, but I would definitely encourage practices to organize quarterly team events. Again, it might not be in your budget, so if you can't do it quarterly, do it once annually. But everybody tends to do it around Christmas time, because yes, it's Christmas, but I always say do it around summertime as well, because it's your 6 months. So you want to share what you guys have achieved in that 6 months, what you haven't achieved in that 6 months, because what you haven't, you've got the next 6 months to encourage and motivate your team to achieve that. So it gives you that flexibility as well. Provide growth and development opportunities. So again, ask people if they want to go on a course, or if there's anything that they need help with. Definitely do that. One of the most important thing is recognize and reward performance. So sometimes even well done, you done really well today, I'm really proud of you. You managed to deal with this patient complaint really quickly, so thank you so much. So recognition is very, very important, I think. And I love recognition. I don't know about all of you guys, but I do really love recognition. Address conflicts and challenges. So ask people, are you currently facing any challenge? Is there anything that you would like help in? That's very important. And evaluate and adjust. So evaluate people's performances, see how things are going. I know all these things are easy said than done, but trust me, if you are taking time out to do them, you will be able to retain your staff for a lot more longer. Okay, so it would definitely 100% help. And that was that was the answer to my third question that I was given. we have got another question on our chat. So hi, okay, Zameer has managed to answer that. Okay, perfect. All right, that's great. So I don't have to go through that question and answer. So as I said to all of you guys, if you have any other questions, me and Zameer is here. Anything about compliance or HR, you're more than welcome to put it in the chat box and we'll be able to answer it for you. Zameer, what do you think then?
Sabo, music to my ears. I really enjoyed that recruitment and team building. And just to emphasize, I agree with everything you said. I think one of the things that any employer, not just in dental, this is across the board. I think one thing we all sometimes forget in the rigmarole of day to day is what sort of brand are we putting out there? And I don't mean brand as in, you know, the marketing brand, but the brand as in what values are we putting out there into the universe? Because that attracts the type of candidates we get back. So it's not just about the advert you put up, but it's everything else that's going on around the socials, the website, any events you go to. Are your values sort of interlinked with everything? Because then you get back effectively what you ask for. So, and I think everything you've said really resonates.
Thank you. We've got another question by Julia. What policy would you recommend for the mobile phone?
Yeah, so it really depends. I mean, obviously, if you've got patient-facing stuff, you know, mobile phones generally on the personal level are a no-no. However, I note some practices allow notes to be taken as well via mobile phone apps. And obviously there's Slack and Teams and that sort of stuff going. So I think probably the outset is to create a policy where you sit down with the team and say, look, we get that you need to interact with your mobile, and we get that we're in a very mobile world, but we have to be respectful of each other and respectful of our patients. This is what we want to put out there. What is it that you think? Because then you're going to get buy-in rather than, and I think the traditional way is put your phone away, put it on silent. I don't want to see it on the desk, you know. And look, that might work for some environments, but I think in nowadays, because everyone's so connected, we need to sit and sell the policy so that people actually comply. You're going to get a lot more buy-in. Again, I think Saba touched on this earlier. It's not always easy because there isn't a lot of time to do everything, and you can't do this with every single policy. But I think with something fundamental, and I would say this is quite fundamental because it's about presentation, it's about reputation. I think this is something where you cluster with the team. It's a 5-10 minute conversation, but it's saying this is what we've noticed as the problem. How do we solve this together? And I think that's where you get the sort of foundation of your policy. So I hope that helps. I think that question was from Julia.
Yep, perfect. Thank you so much, Zameer. Thank you. That was amazing. So
My
yeah,
pleasure.
guys, that brings us to our end of our webinar. And I hope you guys all enjoyed it. You learned something. I did. Definitely need to go back and revisit the contracts. Yeah, need to do on my to-do list tonight. I'm going to look at that. So yeah, it is recorded. It will be on YouTube next week and on the websites as well. And if you guys have any questions, you can reach out. When we do, we will send out a mail shot with all Zameer's details and my details. So if you guys have got any questions that you want to ask, you're more than free to ask. You're more than welcome to ask. But thank you so much for joining us today on a Friday lunchtime. I hope you guys have a lovely weekend. Thank you so much, Zameer, for being here and sharing so many useful tips as always. You're always so useful. Our SOS #1. So thank you so much.
No, you're most welcome. Thanks for having me as well. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. I hope you guys have a lovely weekend. Thank you for joining us. And we shall see you at our next webinar.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.